Hello, my name is Lynda Huxley and I'm just going to give you a short presentation on surveying for swift nest sites. This is the method that I use, but obviously I'm sure as you go along you'll develop your own method on how to survey for nest sites. The topics I'm going to cover in the talk are why survey, what's the importance of it, how to be sure of your identification of a swift, the best times to survey in the days and months, at least on my observations, types of sites with a few videos, and what you can do with your survey report, what you can do with that information. So why survey for nest sites? What I find is that you need to know the size of your breeding population, because you may find that you've got 30 pairs of swifts nest sites, 30 nest sites, or you've only got 6. But finding those nest sites is vital to knowing the size of the breeding population. And also it enables you to maybe try and protect those nest sites in the future. There is no absolute protection for swift nest sites. The birds, the nest sites are protected under the Wildlife Act in Ireland, whilst the swifts are there and breeding and nesting. But once they've left, there is no protection for that site. So what I found is that you can you can help protect the site once you know where the nest sites are, because if people are developing a building where there are swift nest sites, maybe re-roofing, then you can go to them and appeal to them to do the work in such a way that it protects the nest sites. And we've done this in 2 or 3 locations, and it does work, but they just need to know where those nest sites are. And the other point is that protected structures, we have a few protected structures here in Mayo, churches, chapels, and so on, where there are nest sites. They can, when you need to work on a protected structure, you must get planning permission. And so if you've worked with your planning office or with your heritage or biodiversity officer in the council, then you can ensure that in the planning process that it stipulates that the sites should be protected during any renovation work. Being sure of identification is very important, and on the next slide I'll give some information on how to identify, easy identification of the various species. But there is a very nice YouTube video from the British Trust for Ornithology, and I've included the link here. So what I found is the most common confusion is between the swallow, the house martin, the sand martin and the swift. And you can see quite easily that the swallow, house martin and sand martin, they've all got white bellies, whereas the swift does not have a white belly. The only white part on a swift is a little patch on the chin, and this is most obvious when the bird is carrying a bolus. The swallows and house martins have visual mud nests. The swallows is in an outbuilding, the house martin in the eaves of a building, whereas the swift doesn't have a nest that you can see. You see the swift entering the nest site, but the nest itself is hidden from us. And there are very rarely droppings underneath the nest site. There may be little white streaks at the nest entrance, just little marks of urine when the birds entered the nest site, but no, not usually any mess at all. The sand martins are usually in colonies in rural areas, in sandbanks or quarry sites. So their nest site is definitely not to be confused with swifts. The best month to survey, well, early May is when the swifts arrive at their nest sites in Ireland. And it can be difficult surveying nest sites in May. You might be lucky to chance on a new nest site, but it's a good time to check whether birds have returned to known nest sites. The last week in May, things are getting much better because the non-breeding birds are starting to arrive. And June and July I find to be the best, most productive months for the time. So the bangers, the non-breeding birds that are looking for nest sites, have arrived, and also there's lots of socialising, so screening parties. Also in June and July, you've got chicks are hatching, the eggs are hatching, so there are chicks to be fed, and the adults will be feeding the chicks throughout the day. So they can take in food around every 40-45 minutes because it takes them a while to collect a bolus of food. It can be shorter than that, but it's normally around the 45 minutes from research that was being done at GMIT in Casabah. Early August again is starting to get a bit difficult because the bangers have mostly gone and the chicks have mostly fledged. One interesting observation: when the chicks have fledged, you can get groupings of swifts in the evenings in July, late July, where a group of swifts can start to, you can hear them in the sky, and you can see a group all together, and they gradually get higher and higher and disappear out of view, and they're going to spend the night up at altitude. So the best time of day to survey for me is, I like the morning time, and I was saying 8 to 9, really, 9 o'clock is well early enough, and I would stay out until about 11, 12 o'clock in the morning, and in the evening from 8 o'clock up until dark. But it can vary, and I use the GMIT Swift cams to guide me as to what the swift behaviour might be on any particular day. So when the adults are feeding their chicks, they will be visiting the nest site throughout the day. So you could perchance on birds entering a nest site, but the peak activity really is morning and evening. I've just got a little box there at the right showing you roughly the timing for from the laying of the egg to the hatching is about 3 weeks, and then hatching to fledging is 6 weeks. So that gives you an indication of what the time scale is. So this is just showing you what the GMIT Swift cam was showing me on at 8:45 on a bright sunny May day, when you'd expect the swifts to be out. But in fact, you can see there that we've got 9 pairs nesting at GMIT, and they're nearly all there. There's just 2 single birds that have gone out. So that shows you that bright sunny mornings, you wouldn't necessarily find them out early. This is a cool wet May evening around 8 p.m. and nearly all the birds are in. So they're not that keen on staying out late when it's a cool wet evening. Whereas at 10 o'clock on a warm, breezy May evening, they'd only all just come in. And you can see some of them are still looking out of the entrances. They're facing towards the entrance of the nest box, where there's obviously still a few swifts flying around. As I mentioned earlier, when the birds have a feeding young, they have a bolus. And this is a bolus here. This is a little ball of insects. And on these photos, you can see that the throat is swollen. So when you see a bird that's got a swollen throat with a bolus, it's clearly feeding young, and that's a very good indication that there is a successful nest site. And if you can then find the nest site where that bird is going to, it tells you that that nest site is being successful for the year. I see it says at the top of my screen, your screen sharing. I'm not sure how to get rid of that little box. I'll just see. No, I can't move it, so I'm sorry, we'll just have to put up with that. This is all new to me. So what do I do for surveying? I stand around a lot in one location, 15 minutes or more, because I found that swift activity can go in waves. You can have a little screaming group go by, and then off they go, they disappear, and they're gone for a few minutes, could be 5, 10, could be 15 minutes. So it's worthwhile standing around, even if you get to a location where there's no activity, you can hang around in that location. If the weather's bad, rainy and drizzly, then there's not usually very much activity and no screaming parties, so it's not really worth going out to survey on those types of days. Windy days are quite good for collecting nest material and for collecting food, so those windy, breezy days can be very productive. And here's something that's of interest. When the chicks have fledged from a nest box, the adults will continue to use the nest box for a period of time. It can be days, but it can be weeks. And they only go there at night time, last thing at night. So that's when evening surveying can be good, you know, from say mid to late July, that the adults will still be going back to a nest site to spend the night, probably to protect it. So as I mentioned, there's the swifts are hidden nesters, and on this, on the photograph here, you can see that the swift is leaving a tiny hole, and if I hadn't seen the bird leaving that tiny hole, I would never have known that there were nest sites there. The hole is just where the soffit board meets the wall, and it looks like shoddy workmanship, but it's actually an ideal location for swifts. But there are no droppings underneath the nest site, and so there wouldn't have been any other indication. They are breeding now mostly in urban locations, but there are some rural sites, and these are possibly under-recorded. There are a few quarry sites that have been found recently in Ireland, and in Scotland and Scandinavia they nest in woodpecker holes in trees, but we don't know of any of these in Ireland. So the type of sites that we're mostly looking at is buildings, and there can be some rural buildings like this castle, Kinloch Castle, which is situated in the middle of the Mayo countryside, and there are about 11 pairs of swifts there. And the swifts are entering in between the stonework, as you can see here. Sorry. You've then also got the stone buildings, old stone buildings. Many of them are protected structures, such as the church, this church in Charlestown. And then you've got the rendered stone buildings in the towns. So I have a video here that's just showing you bangers investigating natural nest sites at GMIT. And up along the guttering here, there are about 6 nest sites, and you'll be able to see the birds approaching and banging against where the nest site locations are, and hopefully hear the activity. I'll just check, yeah, the volume is good. So you can see that there's repetitive flying up to those location of those nest sites, and quite a lot of social screaming. This site is in Castlebar at the back of a building. Yeah, there you go. Did you see that? And there's the other one, wanting to go in, but he's not going in yet. So you can hear a repetitive noise, high-pitched peeping as they approach the nest site, and this is a good indication of approaching a nest site. I'll just play it one more time. Yeah, there you go. Did you see that? And there's the other one, wanting to go in, but he's not going in yet. I'm just going to show you here a short video which indicates that the building did contain nest sites, and the birds are being excluded from the nest site. And this had happened before anyone had ever recorded this the nest sites in this building, so there was no real knowledge of where the nest sites were. But by seeing this video, if you ever see a swift flying up to scaffolding like this, then you'd know there comes the swift there, trying to get into the location where its nest site was. So this project did have a sort of good outcome in that we worked with the national parks and with the local birdwatch group and myself, and we managed to incorporate some of the Action for Swifts swift bricks to allow birds to get into the building. But we didn't know where the nest sites were, so we located them underneath the guttering there at the top of the wall plate. But you'll see from this video that the swifts are actually trying to get into this area, which was where they had incorporated entrances for bats. But it just shows you that birds are prospecting for nest sites, and they did actually go into the swift entrances where we had set up attraction calls. Here I've got a couple of videos. This first one is in real time and it shows you, I know that there is a nest site here in this location of the building, and so the groups of swifts are constantly flying by that location. So if I see birds flying constantly past the same part of the building, then I stay and watch that location, hoping to see a bird entering the site. It can also indicate that there were nest sites there, but they've been blocked off. So you really have to see birds entering the site to know that there really is a nest site there. So it's just playing the same video again. I'm going to move on to the next video, which is in slow motion. So this has now gone into slow motion, and you'll see some swifts flying by, and then later on you'll actually see a bird entering the nest site. So there's the first swift and the second swift. They're actually flying past that nest site. And now here comes the swift, followed by another one. So straight into the nest site, and the other one flies behind it but doesn't enter the nest site. And that is quite often happens. So when I'm surveying, I wear a high-vis vest with the Swift Conservation Island or Mayo logo on it, so that people know what I'm doing, because wandering around with a pair of binoculars looking up at people's houses and windows can seem a bit suspicious. So I also carry with me a copy of the Swift booklet, We're Swifts, We're in Trouble. And I find that often people stop and ask what I'm doing, and giving them the booklet really helps to raise awareness about the swifts. Many people don't even notice the swifts until you point them out to them. Binoculars are useful but not essential, and of course a clipboard, and I have a copy of the survey report, a survey recording sheet, which you can find an example of on the swiftconservation.ie website. This is a sheet that I'm going to show you a little later on. So I record all the information, I draw a sketch of the site, and I take a photograph. Now, if you can, I would go surveying with other people. it makes the surveying a lot easier. If you have a big building, there can be a few of you on different sides of the building. So more than one pair of eyes is always very useful. And you can see you can get copies of the Swift booklets from me. I'm happy to send out a few copies for free, but if you need more than 4, then some appreciation of €1 each would be helpful. So this is the recording sheet that I use, and there are just a few points that I want. Well, most of it's quite obvious, but some of it I just want to point out. For the grid reference, if you're going to enter your data into the biodiversity data center website, then you'll be able to get the grid reference from there. So you don't need to have it at the time of surveying. Note the number of birds flying around. It's of some value just to show roughly what your local bird numbers are like, your Swift numbers are like. But the numbers, the Swift flying around, you don't know if they're breeding birds. They could be young birds that aren't breeding. There could be just birds passing through. So they're not an indication of the breeding population, but they're just useful to have. And then if you can just note what side of the building it's on. If it's a protected structure, that's another bit of information. I'll show you how you can gather that if you want to gather it. So take a photo of the site as well, and then on the next page do a sketch of the site. It doesn't have to be a neat sketch like that, but you want to know where the nest site entrance is. So is it to the left or the right of a window? Is it near a downpipe? And then you can, when you get home, you can transfer that information to a photograph. And this is valuable, for your own information when you go back to that site. You just want to check, are those nest sites still being used? But also for sharing your survey information, it helps enormously, especially if the site, this building here was renovated and we needed all that information to help them retain the nest sites. You can also mark on your town map, if you like, just to see what the distribution of your Swift colonies are, where they are in the town. So the big value of the nest site survey is to try and protect those sites, which I mentioned earlier on. And you can find the survey on the swiftconservation.ie. There's a survey advice tab. And in that page, you'll find this copy of the survey form, the guidelines, and then a copy of this survey presentation. The other value of knowing where your Swift colonies are is that you can identify suitable sites for suitable nest box projects. And so that's a kind of offshoot value of carrying out a survey. So what can you do with the survey report? Well, having the information just for yourself is of limited value to the Swifts. It's valuable for you, but sharing it, the more people that know, is the greater the chance of preserving the population. So with the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we've set up a Swift portal, and anyone can access that information. The information that's uploaded there is mediated by myself, Lynda Huxley, and also by Ricky Whelan of Birdwatch Ireland. And we are not the only ones that can access this information, but we just make sure that all the records are, valid. And if we have any queries, we can go back to the person who entered the data. But the heritage officers, the biodiversity officers, the national parks, community groups can all go and access this information. So it's valuable to share through that portal. And I would also give a hard copy of your report or a PDF to the heritage officer and biodiversity officer and the National Parks Ranger. Give it to them directly. You can see here, this is an example of a protected structure that was that had 2 nest sites. Now, 2 nest sites might not seem many, but if this is a town that only has 8 nest sites, then losing 2 is very significant. And we had surveyed and marked where the nest sites were, and then lo and behold, we noticed scaffolding on the building. And we were then, because of our knowledge of where the nest sites were, we were able to work with the builder and with the owners to alter the work schedule, alter the scaffolding and protect the nest sites, because this work was being done in the breeding season. So we were able to work with them. They were very keen to do it, and those sites were preserved. So it is a very valuable exercise. So this is the data center, National Biodiversity Data Center website. And if you open the website, you go into submit sightings, and it brings you to this recorder page. Now, you'll have to scroll down because it's in alphabetical order, and the swifts appear under birds, but it's not the best place to record your swift information. So when you scroll down, you'll see there's a swift portal. And in the swift portal, we're looking for much more information than is recorded in the normal birds portal. So this is your swift portal here. And so you put in your recorder name, that's obvious, your email, the date you made the recording, the county, the nearest town or village, and then the spatial reference. Now, for the swift nest site, we really want the close-up spatial reference, so you can see this bottom long figure here. And so on the OSI, you can get a plan of the building. This is a plan of GMIT, and this is where the swift nest boxes are located. So that is giving us the really valuable information that it's that part of the building where the nest sites are. If there are nest sites on more than one face of the building, then you can put your point a little bit more central, and then further on you can give more detailed information. So then we're looking at the next part here. And you can, at this point, record, you can include more detailed information. Is it type of sighting? Is it birds flying, or is it birds at a nest site? If it's birds flying, how many birds? If it's a nest site, number of occupied nest sites, and the name of the building. So here I would put in GMIT. So you've got two options now for how to provide more information. One is that if you've done this photo with all your nest sites identified, then you can upload that photograph here. But if you've done a full report as per your survey report, if you have to save that into a PDF, and here you will be able to include maybe more than one photo. And so you can upload your PDF with a maximum size of 2 megabytes. Many people find just uploading the photo is much easier than submitting the full survey report, but not submitting a photo and not submitting a PDF is of very limited value, because you might say there are 10 nest sites, but we don't know where they are. So therefore we cannot save those sites if we ever get an opportunity. If it's a protected building, you may not know. If you click on that, it says true or false. But if you don't know, you can just leave it as there's an option for don't know. But if you want to find out, then you go to this website. It's buildingsofireland.ie, and you put in your county, and you can search by town. So if I put in Castlebar, it gives me all of a long list of sites. But I can see, I know that this is the chapel here near, this, beg your pardon. This chapel here is a protected structure, and it does have swifts. So I can see the registered number there. And so that is valuable information for me to put in my survey report, but you can't put in the registration number on the data center website other than through your PDF report. I hope that makes sense. Seems a little bit convoluted. But basically, you knowing that site and what the registration number is can be valuable information to pass on to any heritage officer or any national parks ranger. So I've mentioned it a few times, so I won't go over it again, but the data centre is a source of information for County Council employees in National Parks and Wildlife. If the nest sites are in a public building, then it is well worth informing your heritage or biodiversity officer, because the councils will not want to be, or whoever owns the public building will not want to be seen to be destroying swift nest sites in any renovation work. So the value really of your Swift survey is to provide valuable information on the size of the colony and the exact locations, but you are the eyes of the Swift. If I come to your town and do a survey, that's fine, I have the knowledge, I can do the survey report, but you're on the ground. If a building is being worked on, I won't be able to know up in Mayo. You will be the person that's passing by those sites every day. So having all that information about the site, and if you see any renovation work happening and you think they're not taking into consideration the swift nest sites, then you have an opportunity to go to the council, to go to the owner, to go to the developers and try and plead to their goodwill to, you know, to save those sites. It's worked for me here in Mayo, and it's actually has built up a lot of goodwill and a lot of interest from people. So I believe it can work elsewhere. Sorry. So here are some useful links. You've got the swiftconservation.ie. You've got Birdwatch Ireland, who have a Swift page. And then you've got the National Biodiversity Data Centre Swift portal. There are two publications. The one I've mentioned already is a little booklet that you can get from me, which is We're Swifts, We're in Trouble. And then Saving Swifts, which is a Birdwatch Ireland publication, which is available PDF on swiftconservation.ie and from Ricky Whelan at Birdwatch Ireland. So if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. I hope that you found this this presentation useful in these difficult times of COVID-19, and it's not possible to go out and give any on-the-ground training sessions. So hopefully this will be of some value. I hope you'll really enjoy surveying swift nest sites, and please spread the love for swifts. Thank you very much.